Russia is preparing for a long war. Evidence of this is a draft budget for the next 3 years. In 2025, the Kremlin plans to spend 13.5 trillion rubles on the army and military-industrial complex. Another 3.5 trillion rubles will go to security forces. Together, these two areas account for about 40% of total budget expenditures. This trend is expected to continue in 2026 and 2027. Moscow's priorities are to sustain Russia's war against Ukraine and suppress domestic dissent, experts explain. And the number of dissatisfied Russians is likely to grow. Inflation is steadily eroding their modest incomes. In October, the central bank raised the key interest rate again, which now stands at 21%. This has happened before, experts note, recalling when Russia tried to overcome the crisis of the 90s.
By all indicators, we are returning to a similar situation. Yield on government bonds, the central bank rate. So the 90s are haunting us. They are attempting to increase spending, but not significantly. The same applies to interest rates. Clearly, they fear causing a shock to their situation, but as we can see over time, the consequences of shock still catch up with them.
The economy is particularly hard hit by a shortage of personnel due to Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine and Putin's mobilization efforts. Hundreds of thousands of workers have left the country. This immigration has become the largest in the last 3 decades, with highly skilled professionals leaving first. Mobilization and significant losses in the Russian army at the front have led to complaints about a labor shortage across all sectors of the economy, except perhaps in the defense industry. Analysts predict a decline in production in the private sector if this trend continues.
The difficult demographic situation and labor shortage are the main challenges facing the Russian economy today. The Kremlin lacks enough human resources to sustain the war and ensure economic growth at the same time. And attracting more migrants is also not feasible. In this context, wage growth does not contribute to increasing labor productivity or technological advancement. Instead, it fuels inflation. Alexander Prokopenko, fellow at the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center in Berlin, from an article in the center's website.
In July 2024, Elvira Nabiulina, the governor of the Central Bank of Russia, stated that the country's production capacity and labor resources are nearly exhausted due to economic overheating. Analysts believe this is one reason why Putin is reluctant to announce a new wave of mobilization, preferring instead to recruit military personnel from North Korea.
Russian resources are finite, and Putin cannot reckon with these costs indefinitely. Russia's economy will reach a burnout point. That burnout point will inflict a great cost on Russian society, which may force Putin to make major decisions about how to resource Russia's war or change Russia's mode of war fighting to preserve his regime's stability. From an Institute for the Study of War report.
However, experts believe there will be no sharp collapse in the near future. Revenues from energy resource sales are expected to provide a more or less stable influx into the Russian budget, according to the Washington Post. Moscow will offset record military expenditures by cutting funding for social programs. Reported by Serhiy Kulas, Andriy Dmitrenko, UATV News.